You know, revolutions are almost always born in violence. It just comes with the territory. But what happens when that violence stops being a chaotic side effect and becomes a deliberate, calculated tool of the state? Well, today we're going to dive into one of the most brutal chapters of the Russian Revolution, the Red Terror. It's a campaign that would really define the Soviet state for decades to come.
Okay, so let's be really clear about what we're talking about here. The Red Terror, it wasn't just random chaos, and it wasn't simply the brutality of a civil war. No, this was a deliberate, top-down campaign of fear officially put into motion by the new Bolshevik government. The goal? It was simple, and it was absolutely ruthless. Crush all your enemies and get an iron grip on power.
So how on earth did a revolution that promised peace, land, and bread spiral into such systematic violence? To really get the terror, you have to look at the moments that lit the fuse. Because back in the summer of 1918, the Bolsheviks felt like their brand new world was about to be strangled in its cradle.
I mean, the speed of this escalation is just breathtaking. Think about this. On a single day, August 30th, 1918, the head of the Petrograd secret police gets assassinated, and then Lenin himself is shot and badly wounded. To the Bolsheviks, this was proof of a full-blown, coordinated attack, and the response was incredibly fast and unbelievably brutal. Just 6 days later, the state officially decrees the start of the Red Terror.
But here's the thing. This wasn't just a panicked reaction. The ideological groundwork for this was already there. Just look at this quote from Lenin himself. "Coercion is an instrument of policy." He didn't see organized violence as some regrettable last resort. No, for him, it was a standard political tool, just like any other. The assassination attempts, they weren't the cause of the terror, they were the excuse.
Okay, so to carry out a nationwide campaign of terror, you're going to need an instrument. You need an organization to do the dirty work. For the Bolsheviks, that instrument was a brand new secret police force, one whose name would become totally synonymous with fear, the Cheka.
And the Cheka's growth was nothing short of explosive. It started in 1917 as this tiny little commission of just 40 people. But by 1921, it had ballooned to 250,000 agents. This wasn't just an organization anymore. It was a massive, nationwide apparatus of repression, with eyes and ears in literally every corner of the country.
And every instrument of fear needs a headquarters, a central hub. For the Cheka, that place was the Lubyanka building in Moscow. It wasn't just some office building. It became the ultimate symbol of the terror, a place where interrogations, torture, and execution orders became chillingly routine.
So the Bolsheviks had their justification and they had their instrument. The next big question was, who were they going to target? Well, the answer was just chillingly broad. Pretty much anyone they could label a class enemy. And the net they cast was just incredibly wide. Of course, it caught the obvious targets, old czarist officials and big landowners, but it also swept up rival socialists who had once been their comrades, priests, and even well-off peasants. In the end, though, the most dangerous label you could get was simply counter-revolutionary, a term so vague it could mean almost anything or anyone.
And the payback was immediate. In Petrograd alone, right after the attacks on Uritsky and Lenin, the Cheka executed over 500 people. This had nothing to do with justice. It was all about sending a terrifying message of absolute, uncompromising power.
And even before the terror was officially decreed, the Bolsheviks had already shown just how ruthless they were willing to be. The execution of Tsar Nicholas II and his entire family back in July 1918 was a huge symbolic act. It basically signaled that there was no going back, and it got rid of the most powerful symbol their enemies could rally around.
So what was the final human cost of just the executions? The tough answer is, we'll probably never know the exact number. So many killings just went undocumented. Historians debate the figures, but even the most conservative, low-end estimate is just staggering. 100,000 deaths. The real number is likely much, much higher.
And you have to remember, the terror went way beyond firing squads. Peasant rebellions were crushed with mass executions and even, horrifically, chemical weapons. When the sailors at the Kronstadt naval base rose up, they were met with overwhelming military force. A whole nationwide network of over 80 concentration camps was set up, imprisoning tens of thousands. The Bolsheviks used basically every method they could think of to stamp out dissent.
All right, so the Red Terror officially started to wind down around 1922, but its impact, it was profound, and it was incredibly long-lasting. It fundamentally shaped the entire nature of the Soviet state for the next 70 years.
And here's the crucial, kind of chilling point. From the Bolsheviks' perspective, The Terror was a brutal success. It worked. By the early 1920s, any real political opposition had been silenced, arrested, or just straight up killed. They had successfully built a one-party state using sheer force.
And Lenin's own words, once again, just drive home the cold logic they were using. A revolution without firing squads is meaningless. Wow. I mean, that leaves absolutely no room for doubt. For him, executing your enemies wasn't some unfortunate side effect of a revolution, it was the entire point.
So the Cheka itself was formally disbanded in 1922, but its spirit and, a lot of its agents, they lived on. The organization just changed its name over the years. It evolved from the GPU to the OGPU and eventually to the infamous NKVD, which was the instrument of Stalin's Great Purge. The machinery of repression had become a permanent part of the Soviet state.
And really, as historian Orlando Figes puts it so well, the Cheka was the foundation stone of the Soviet police state. It wasn't some temporary wartime thing. It was the bedrock, the very foundation upon which the entire Soviet system of control was built, with a legacy that would define life for millions of people for decades.
All of this leaves us with one final, big, lingering question. The Red Terror, yeah, it helped the Bolsheviks win the Civil War and secure their power, but in doing that, it created a system built on fear from the very beginning. So we really have to ask ourselves, what is the true, lasting price of a revolution that's won through terror?